We had been in Canada only 2 or 3 years when it became increasingly clear to me that looking after my parents, my mother and father, over 7 seas was taking an enormous toll on me and on them. And my feelings of responsibility for them and care for them were just as high as my feelings of responsibility for my young daughter at that time. And so we decided that it probably made better sense for us to sponsor them. This was in the mid-80s, and if I remember correctly, it took all of 1 year to get them over. Of course, that doesn't happen anymore. And I still remember the first few months they arrived. I had 2 children by that time. You know, the grandparents and the grandchildren were sort of tentative around each other. But it was wonderful to see between my 2 daughters and my mother in particular, the bonding that developed. At that time we were very busy, my husband and I were very busy trying to make our way in Canada. He had his first real job, as did I, and we knew we had to perform at 150%. So for both of us it meant long nights and weekend work, committee meetings for me and task forces for me and extra hours for him as an engineer. And my mother held the fort down, and we were only able to do what we did because she provided the foundation at home. But beyond that, I remember coming home so many times and finding out that the entire neighborhood block's kids had been at our house. And you know, it was just a wonderful feeling to know that my home was really a family home. The mothers on the street also took to relying on my home and my mother in it as the default caregiver in case things went wrong or deliveries had to be made or an emergency had to be looked after. And it was just fantastic for my children as we were all learning to become Canadians. She held her own in reminding us of the best from where we came. I don't know how you put a value on those things, but I do know that as she enters the winter of her life, that my daughters and I are very involved in her care and will continue to be involved in her care. It does not even occur to us, least of all to my 2 daughters, that we will not look after her at home as it is in our families. And interestingly, when I sometimes talk about growing old and where will I live, there's a look of total perplexity on their faces because they say, but Mom, of course, you will live with us. So once again, I don't quite know how you put a value to that.
For my family, the difference of having a grandparent come made it changed our lives. We came here, a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old with our parents, and the childcare situation was really precarious. My parents couldn't put us in a place where they felt we were safe and well taken care of. And so when my grandmother came to join us, it meant that my dad was able to go to Humber College, and he went then from cleaning the floor in a factory to being a systems analyst. And my mother was able to work and support the family the whole time, and so that meant really establishing ourselves. Eventually they were able to buy a house, not to mention the incredible care and affection that her presence meant in our community. We were an exile community, and it wasn't just us who called her abuelita, grandmother. It was everyone, all the kids, and an extended family of people that had come fleeing violence but ended up settling here as immigrants. And so the presence of an older person that can bring us together that way was something that, it's going to stay with me forever.
I was very lucky because growing up I was very close to my grandparents. My grandfather always wore a collared shirt everywhere he went. Just a fancier collared shirt on Sundays, and he was everybody loved him. He was just such a sweet man. And My grandmother, on the other hand, was a tough cookie and feisty, and they were really into each other. You know, I actually caught my grandmother once checking my grandfather out, which was totally gross, but really sweet. And when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother had never lived on her own, and actually she had never gone to school, so her literacy skills were just not there. And my aunt lived in France and we lived in Canada, and you know, it just wasn't an option to leave her there in the house that she had basically lived in for the last 50 years. And so I remember my dad started saying, well, she's going to come to Canada, and he said it with this faith, like it was just going to happen, it was going to get done. And I think it's because, you know, my dad had lived here for more than 30 years, and he loved Canada, and he loves Canada, and he just thought, you know, why not? This you know, it must be possible. He just had a faith that it was possible. And I kept my mouth shut because I thought, oh, I know it's not that easy. It's absolutely not that easy. And thankfully, you know, it all worked out. And my grandmother went to live with my aunt in France until she passed away. This is not an economic issue. This is about people's families and people's lives. And if it is an economic issue, then I want to understand at what point have my parents contributed enough? At what point have I, who've lived here, was born here, contributed enough to be able to bring my grandmother to Canada?